I didn't believe in rules until I started working the night shift at a tiny airport in Alaska, the kind of place where the runway lights look like a necklace thrown across a frozen black ocean and the wind screams like it's mad you're still alive. My first night, the day's supervisor, a worn-out guy named McCrae with frost-cracked knuckles and eyes that never blinked at the right time, slid a stapled packet across the desk like it weighed 100 pounds. Not the employee handbook. Not safety procedures. A separate list. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. He didn't even look relieved to be leaving. He just said, "You work nights. You follow these. If you don't bother calling anybody. You'll be too busy." I laughed, because that's what you do when you're nervous and you don't want to look like the new guy, and the laugh came out thin in the quiet office. McCrae's face stayed flat. He tapped the top page with one finger. Rule 1, when the radio plays music at 3:07 a.m., do not answer it. Unplug it if you have to. Do not speak to it. He tapped the next line. Rule 2, if you see a plane listed on the arrivals board that doesn't exist in the system, do not update it. Do not announce it. Do not go to meet it. Another tap. Rule 3, if the runway lights blink 3 times in a row, you lock the tower door and you do not look outside until the blinking stops. I flipped through, expecting some prank. I'd heard stories. Small-town workplaces messing with newbies. But the paper wasn't funny. It was typed, clean, and old enough that the corners were soft from being handled. And each rule had dates beside it, like revisions, years of them, like somebody kept learning the hard way. I asked McCrae if this was some tradition. His eyes shifted for the first time, not to me but to the window, to the darkness beyond the glass where the runway sat under the aurora like a bruise of light. "Kid," he said quietly, "if you want to make it to sunrise, you treat that list like the 10 Commandments." Then he took his coat, stepped out into the cold, and didn't look back. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the building felt too big for just one person. It wasn't a major airport, just one terminal, a small control tower attached like an afterthought, and a few hangars crouched on the edge of endless snow. The nights were long. The kind of long that makes time feel like a hallway you can't find the end of. My job was simple on paper: monitor the radios, log any late arrivals, keep the lights and gates in order, and do security checks every hour. You'd think the hardest part would be staying awake. But in Alaska, awake is easy. The cold keeps your bones alert, and the dark keeps your imagination loud. I tucked the rules into a clipboard and told myself it was superstition, just like fishermen refusing to whistle on boats, and I started my first rounds. The terminal was empty except for the hum of vending machines and the distant wheeze of the heating system fighting the night. Outside, the wind dragged snow across the tarmac in pale sheets, and the runway lights glowed steady and obedient. For the first few hours, nothing happened. I sipped burnt coffee, watched the clock crawl, and even started to feel stupid for being tense. Then, at exactly 2:58 a.m., the arrivals board flickered. Not the entire thing, just one line. A flight number appeared in clean, bright letters like it had always been there: NVA 981. Origin, destination, arrival, 3:11 a.m. gate, 0. I frowned, checked the system. Nothing. I refreshed. Nothing. I checked the weather radar. Clear skies, no scheduled landings until morning. I looked at the rules. Rule 2 stared back at me like it already knew I was reading it. I told myself, fine. I won't touch it. I won't announce it. I'll treat it like a glitch. Then, at 3:07 a.m., the radio on the desk crackled. Not with static, real sound. Music. An old tune, tinny and cheerful, like a big band recording pulled from a dusty record player. It didn't belong on any frequency. It wasn't coming from the PA. It was coming from the handheld radio itself, the one that should have been silent unless someone keyed in. The melody rose and fell, almost sweet, and then it hit me. the rules said when the radio plays music at 3:07 a.m., do not answer it. My first instinct was to laugh again, to make it less creepy. My second instinct was to do the opposite of what every horror movie idiot does. I grabbed the radio and turned it off. The music kept playing. I stared at the dark screen, felt my skin tighten. I pulled the battery. The music kept playing, softer now, like it was under the desk. My throat went dry. I reached down and yanked the cord from the wall outlet, because yes, the desk radio also had a bass unit. The music stopped so suddenly the silence rang. I didn't say a word. I didn't even breathe right for a moment. Then the tower phone rang once. Just once. I didn't pick it up. The rules didn't mention the phone, but the feeling in my gut did, and I let it ring itself into quiet. When it stopped, I realized my hands were shaking. I told myself it was the cold. I told myself it was my brain looking for patterns. But then the arrivals board blinked again, and NBA 981's arrival time changed from 3:11 to 3:09. Like it was getting closer. I stepped into the tower hallway, and the air felt different there, thicker, like the building was holding its breath. I checked the outside cameras instead of looking out the window, because that felt safer, like a screen could filter whatever was out there. The camera view showed the runway stretching into darkness, light steady, snow drifting. Nothing. No plane. No headlights. No movement. Then the runway lights blinked 3 times in a row. 1, 2, 3. Not a flicker. A deliberate blink. My chest tightened so hard it hurt, and my eyes snapped to Rule 3. Lock the tower door. Do not look outside until the blinking stops. I didn't question it. I ran, slammed the heavy door shut, and turned the lock until it clicked like a gun cocking. I backed away from the window, turned my chair so my back was to it, and stared at the wall like a kid hiding from thunder. The silence stretched. My ears filled with my own pulse. Somewhere outside, something big moved through the wind, not a sound, exactly, more like pressure, like the air itself being displaced by something that didn't want to be seen. The lights blinked again. 3 times. I clenched my jaw and refused to turn around. I don't know how long it went on, could have been 30 seconds, could have been 10 minutes, but finally the blinking stopped, and the normal steady glow returned. Only then did I allow myself to look back at the monitors. The runway camera had frost on the lens now, a thin haze, but I could still see the lights. And something else. At the far end of the runway, where the darkness should have swallowed everything, there was a shape, too tall to be a plane, too narrow to be a vehicle, standing perfectly still in the spill of the runway lights. It didn't move like a person. It didn't shift weight. It was just there, like someone had drawn a vertical line on the world. I leaned closer to the screen, heart hammering, and the image fuzzed for a second. When it cleared, the shape was closer. Not walking. Closer like a camera jump cut, like reality skipped frames. The lights didn't blink this time. The thing didn't need permission. I felt my mouth open, a desperate sound trying to crawl out, and I slammed it shut with my own teeth because Rule 1 screamed in my head, do not speak to it. Don't answer it. Don't engage. I reached for the clipboard, flipped pages with stiff fingers. Rule 7, if something stands on the runway without triggering motion sensors, do not activate the siren. Turn off the runway mic, pretend you do not see it. Pretend harder than you've ever pretended in your life. I turned off the runway mic with a shaking hand, then sat perfectly still, eyes locked on the monitor. The shape got closer again, and this time I could make out edges. Angles. Like wings folded the wrong way. Like a silhouette of a plane that had decided to try being upright. The camera began to distort around it, the pixels bending like heat shimmer. My stomach lurched. The tower phone rang again, 3 rings this time, and stopped. Then the PA system in the terminal below hissed to life. A voice came through, smooth as an airline announcement, calm and practiced, now arriving at Gate 0. Flight NV 981. The hairs on my arms rose so fast it felt like a warning siren under my skin. Gate 0 didn't exist. There was no Gate 0. We had Gate 1 and Gate 2, and both were locked because there were no flights scheduled. The voice continued, polite as poison, passengers may now disembark. I heard something from downstairs then. Not footsteps. Not exactly. More like, dragging. Like wet fabric being pulled across tile. Slow. Patient. Coming from the direction of the jet bridge that we didn't even use at night. The rules weren't funny anymore. They were a lifeline. I flipped to the back, breath ragged, and found the one McRae had underlined in thick ink. Rule 12, if you hear an arrival announcement for Gate 0, do not go downstairs. Do not check the terminal. Turn off all interior lights. Hide in the tower office restroom and lock the door until you hear the first morning bird call. If there are no birds, do not leave. I didn't argue. I killed the interior lights with one switch, plunging the building into emergency glow, then moved as quietly as I could across the tower floor. The dragging sound below grew louder, like whatever it was had found the hallway that led toward the stairs. I reached the restroom, slipped inside, and locked the door. In the dark, the tiny room smelled like bleach and cold porcelain. I sat on the floor with my knees to my chest, phone clutched in my hand even though I knew there was no one to call who could fix what was happening. The building creaked. Somewhere outside, wind slapped against glass. Then I heard it, right outside the restroom door, something that sounded like a hand brushing the wall, searching. Not tapping. Not knocking. Feeling. I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep from making a sound. The searching stopped at my door. Silence. Then, softly, the tower radio, still dead, still unplugged, began to play that big band music again, muffled and close, like it was in the hallway with me. Under the music, a voice whispered, not through speakers but through the air itself, intimate and wrong, "Tower, this is Flight NVA 981 requesting clearance." My eyes filled with tears I didn't want, not from sadness but from pure animal fear. I remembered Rule 1. Do not answer it. Unplug it. Do not speak to it. I stayed silent, teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. The voice waited, as if it expected compliance. Then it whispered again, warmer this time, almost friendly. We've been circling a long time. Let us in. The hallway grew colder, the kind of cold that doesn't belong inside a heated building. My breath fogged in front of my face. Something pressed against the door, not a slam, just pressure, like a forehead leaning in close. The music warped, slowed, as if the tape was melting. I stared at the doorknob, waiting for it to turn. It didn't. Instead, the pressure eased, and the whisper slid away down the hall, trailing a sound like paper scraping concrete. Minutes passed like hours. My legs went numb. Somewhere far below, the PA system crackled again, final call for all passengers. Then, silence. The dragging stopped. The radio music faded like a dying heartbeat. I didn't move. I didn't breathe deep. I just listened for something to confirm it was gone, but the rules didn't say to trust quiet. They said to trust birds. So I waited, mind spinning, wondering if Alaska even had birds in winter nights, wondering if I would ever hear morning again. At some point I must have dozed, my body betraying me in tiny stolen seconds, because I startled awake to a sound so small it almost didn't register, a chirp. Then another. A thin, stubborn little bird call outside, like the world refusing to surrender completely. I stayed in the restroom 5 more minutes anyway, just to be sure, then unlocked the door and stepped out. The tower was still dark, emergency lights glowing. The runway camera monitors were normal again, no upright shape at the end of the runway, no distortion. The arrivals board was blank where NVA 981 had been. But the temperature inside the building still felt off, like something had taken warmth with it. I walked downstairs slowly, every sense screaming, and found the terminal empty, no footprints, no wet drag marks, no sign of passengers. Only one thing was different, the main entrance doors, which I knew I had locked, were standing slightly open. Just a crack, enough to let in a ribbon of cold air that curled along the floor like a living thing. On the tile near the threshold sat a single object, perfectly placed, a boarding pass, white paper against gray floor. No name. No seat number. Just a flight code printed in bold, NVA 981. And beneath it, in smaller letters, a time stamp, 3:07 a.m. I didn't touch it. I didn't pick it up like a curious idiot. I went back to the office, pulled the rule packet from the clipboard, and on the last page I wrote my own line in shaky handwriting, Rule 13, if you survive the first Gate 0 announcement, do not assume it won't happen again. When McCrae came in at dawn, he took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. He just nodded like he'd been expecting it, then quietly added a new staple to the packet, another page behind mine. I caught a glimpse of the heading before he flipped it shut, Revision, Gate 0, Increased Frequency. My stomach dropped. It's happening more? I asked, voice raw. McCrae stared past me, out the window at the pale morning light crawling over the snow. It's getting closer, he said. And now it knows you work nights. So listen to me, if you've made it this far, if you want the next part of this story and the full list of rules I'm not even allowed to write down on company paper, make sure you subscribe right now, because the night shift at this airport doesn't end when the sun comes up, it just waits for 3:07 a.m. to come back around.